If you don't like black cats, I'm disappointed in you. Just kidding, but I actually do have a cat who looks just like this. So, grab a drink, snack, and I got my cozy blanket, pimple patches. What more can you need? Let's get cozy and let's get started. Okay, first story is titled "Something is Pretending to Be Me." Something is pretending to be me. There's two reasons I believe this. We'll start with the first thing that happened. About a week ago, my friend was staying at my house and we were watching scary videos at night. She told me she had to go home, but she was scared to walk out to her car by herself. So I walked out with her, but only halfway. As soon as she shut her car door, I ran back inside because I was also scared to be out by myself. Around 20 seconds later, she calls me and asks, "Were you still standing out there after I pulled away?" I said no. She told me she still saw me standing there and rolled down her window and asked, "Why are you still watching me?" She got no response. She said she described it like looking just like me, but with a red face. She said she felt uneasy with no response, so she just drove off. And my second reason tonight, sorry if there's a lighting change, it's like kind of partly cloudy. My second reason tonight, my brother asked me to go on a walk with him and his friend, so I said yes. About 10 minutes into the walk, I received these messages from my mom. And then there's screenshots that I'll read. So, the person telling the story said, "What?" And his mom said, or his sibling said, "Who's in your room effing with us?" They said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Someone was calling mom." And he said, "I'm on a walk, bro." And then the person said, someone called mom like twice. And we answered, and the kid said no one was back there. Someone called mom like twice. We answered, and the kid said no one was back there. Me and grandma both heard it. Did it sound like my voice? I don't know. I couldn't tell if it was you or Killian, but we both heard it plain as day. Someone was in your room. There's no way. I yelled what grandma even heard it. And then they called. Someone said, "Get home now." And he said, "Girl, I am home, sitting on the porch." I mean, I don't even know what to make of that. Like, what could that even be? Sounds like y'all invited some spooky stuff to your house. Okay, next story. Okay, this next story is kind of long, so buckle up. It's called The Bean Jar. And by the way, I'm on the Reddit thread, spooky_stories. So it's titled The Bean Jar. Dad was always kind of a weird guy. Weird and strict. I always thought this was just because he was a single parent, but even that seemed to only barely cover his odd behavior. He expected the best of me, expected my chores to be done, expected the rules to be followed, and if I These were spotted pinto beans, and the kind that I had used on art projects and crafts since before I could remember, and I noticed they had been filled up to the brim. All in all, there were probably about 3 bags of beans in there, and a piece of Scotch tape declared it to be my jar. "Take a seat. We need to have a very serious talk," he said, and I ended up just sitting on the floor of our living room and looking up at him. He looked very serious, more serious than I had ever seen him before, and that scared me a bit. Up until now, Dad had always been this goofy guy who played pirates and astronauts and Mario Kart with me, but now he looked like a judge ready to sentence me to death if I didn't have a pretty good defense for my crime. "You are 6 now, long past knowing right from wrong. In this family, it is customary to use the bean jar to punish children. Do you see this jar?" he asked, like there was any way I could miss it. I nodded and he smiled, seeming pleased. "The bean jar symbolizes you. It is everything that you are and everything you might be. So from now on, when you are bad or insolent or you disobey my orders, I will not yell at you or send you to your room. I won't do anything but take a bean from the bean jar." I almost laughed. Was this a game or something? Was I supposed to be scared of a jar of beans? This had to be another one of my dad's jokes. Dad was always doing stuff like this, telling me how the monsters in my closet could be kept away by a teddy bear, or that the cavity creeps would eat my teeth if I didn't brush them twice a day. Dad was a goofball. He always had been, but I think it was his face that made me wonder if he was joking or not. Throughout the whole thing, he just sat there, deadly serious, and never averted his eyes from me. "You're a smart kid, just like I was, and I see now that you'll need an example. You may think this is just a regular jar, but you're wrong," he said, reaching in and picking up a bean. "Dead wrong." He didn't even take it out. He just lifted a little, hovering it over the pile, but he didn't need to do anything else. Suddenly, miraculously, it felt like someone was touching my brain. It was the feeling of getting a sudden sadness, a sudden bit of anxiety, and I wanted to drop that bean back in the jar. I needed to be whole. I needed all my beans, and he must have seen that in my face because he dropped it back in, and I trembled as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. "I'm sorry, but you have to know what's at stake here. You're my last chance, and I have to make sure that you are perfect, and the bean jar knows perfection from flaw. My own father used this method, and his father before him. The bean jar is always used until the child's 18th birthday, or until all the beans are gone." I was panting when I asked him what would happen if all the beans are gone. He looked at me without mirth and without any sign of joke or a goof. "You don't want to know." That's how we started with the bean jar. Dad didn't suddenly turn into an ogre or become a villain overnight. He went back to being the same guy he'd always been. We would play video games together, build with my Legos, and play pretend after school. My dad had never always punished, and I always fell into a state of anxious, nervous emotions once it was done. I hated the way it felt when he crushed those beans, and I didn't want to lose another one. I didn't want to lose them so badly that I trained myself to perform the tasks expected of me without fail. 5 a.m. start the laundry, 5:20 make breakfast, 5:30 wash my dishes, 5:40 dress, 6 o'clock clean up my room, 6:30 backpack on, fully dressed, waiting by the door to leave, 3:10 get home, do homework, 4:30 clean house, 5 start dinner, 6 eat dinner when my father got home, 9 o'clock brush teeth, take a shower, 9:30 bedtime. Every day without fail these things were done, or I would be one bean shorter. This manifested itself as a kind of mania in me. Not only did I have to get all my chores done, but I needed to get good grades too. After a while, good wasn't good enough either. What if Dad decided that C's and B's weren't good enough? I strove for all A's, and Dad seemed happy with my efforts. To the other kids, however, I was a weirdo, and I didn't really have any friends. Dad was my only friend, but it was a strange kind of friendship. Like living with someone who has schizophrenia and could change at the slightest inclination. I didn't have any real friends until high school when I met Cass. Cassandra Bigley was not what you would consider a model student. Her parents had high expectations for her, but she was a middling at best. She came to me because I was the smartest kid in school, at least according to the other kids, and she begged me to help her. I helped her, tutored her, showed her the way, and soon her grades improved. That's how we became best friends. Lost my place. That's how we became friends, and how she was the first to find out about the bean jar. So he just takes a bean out and crushes it. Yes, I said, not sounding at all mystified about the process. And what? It means you have less beans? I thought about it. Dad had never actually told me what would happen, only that it would be terrible. When he takes out all the beans, then something awful will happen. Like what? Cass asked. No dessert for a month. I don't know, but I know that when he crushes those beans, it's like a piece of my sanity is mushed. I feel crazy after he smushes a bean. I don't like feeling that way. I don't like it at all. I started crying. I hadn't meant to. I was 16 already, and I had never cried anymore. But Cass didn't make me feel bad about it. She just held me while I cried and eventually stopped. It had felt good to be held. Dad hugged me, but he never really comforted me. I didn't have a mom, someone whose job seemed to be comforting me. And as Cass held me, I realized what I had been missing all these years. I had been missing a mom that I had never known. We hung out a lot after that, Cass and I. Despite our age, it never became inappropriate. She gave me something I had been missing, a friend without the threat of punishment looming over our relationship. The realization made me feel differently about my dad. He was still the lovable goofball that he had always been, but I started to see how our entire relationship hung under the shadow of that bean jar. As I pulled away from him, he became more sullen and more suspicious, and I saw him holding the bean jar sometimes as if he wished to smash them. If I wasn't misbehaving, though, he couldn't. That was always the deal. He knew it, I knew it, and he knew that as long as I abided by the rules, he couldn't punish me. Despite how it may sound, Dad was never cruel about the bean jar. He never used it to take out his frustrations. He never came home and punished me simply because he had a bad day. The rules were established. We had both agreed to them, and I knew that by following them, I would be safe. So Cass and I came back to the house to play video games. She had never even seen a Super Nintendo. And she wanted to play some Mario Kart with me. We had come in laughing and making jokes when someone cleared their throat loudly, sending a chill up my spine. And turning to me slowly to find my dad sitting on the couch. He looked so much like he had the day he introduced the bean jar. Sorry for the wind. And he was wearing that look of pain and resolve. You come home late, your chores aren't done, and your homework is undone, and you have brought someone here without permission. Why have you decided to break rules like this? I saw the hammer come down on the table, but I hadn't realized what he'd done until then. It turned the bean he had laid there to smithereens, and I shuddered as I gripped my head and moaned. If he noticed, he made no comment. He just brought the hammer down on another one, and I nearly vomited as a pain like no other went through me. He had lined up 4, one for each infraction, but he had never done anything like this. It had always been one at a time, and that had been bad enough. This, however, was unbearable. Stop it, Cass yelled. Whatever you're doing to him, stop. But he cut her off. He grabbed her under the arm and heaved her towards the door. This is your fault. You've changed him, made him forget his purpose, but I won't let you kill him. You aren't allowed in this house never again, and I... Put her down, I growled, finding my feet, weaving only a little. You will not touch her. Not. My father looked at me, not believing what he was hearing. Put her down, now, I repeated, stepping up close and getting in his face. You dare to challenge me. You're no different than the rest. I tried to raise you better, but it appears I was a fool. I'll smash every damn bean in that jar if I have to. When all the beans are gone, you'll cease to exist. I'll smash every damn bean in that jar just to prove. Just to prove. But he never finished. He let go of the hammer as he clutched his chest, as it fell from his grip, and he gasped, and he let go of the hammer as he clutched his chest, and it fell from his grip as he gasped and beat at his shirt front. His face had gone from red to purple, and before he hit the floor, it was nearly black. I just stood there for a moment, listening to Cass beat at the door and ask what was wrong. I couldn't answer. I just stood there, feeling like I was suffocating at the realization that my father, trigger warning, death, was dead, fell across me. That was 2 years ago. I've been living with Cass since then, her parents taking me in gladly. Cass and I are getting ready for college, and that's when I remembered the house. It's still there, still sitting on the same lot, and I decided that it might be good to sell it so I can pay tuition. There were things inside as well. I've been back there a few times to get things, and I knew my father's room was essentially untouched. The police hadn't bothered to search the place. Dad's death was no mystery after all, and they decided he died of a heart attack and saved me a lengthy interrogation. I started cleaning it out as summer began, selling what I could and donating what I couldn't. I found pictures of my dad and I taken in better times, and far too soon I had cleaned out everything and was left with only my father's room. I paused at the door, almost feeling like a burglar when I thought of going in there, but I finally decided this was my house now, and this room was as good as mine. The room was Spartan, a bed, a dresser, and a closet, but it was what I found inside that took me by surprise. 5 jars, each of them bearing a different name. Jacob, Mark, Sylvester, Katie, and James. They were empty, the lids gone, the broken, but the tape intact. Maggie. When the beans are gone, I heard my dad's voice echo in my head. Then you cease to exist. Had the names on those jars been real people? Had I lived with them and simply didn't remember them? How could you remember people who never existed? I sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of it all, and finally decided to write all this before it grew unclear. Apparently Dad wasn't as crazy as I might have thought, and maybe I should have been more respectful of the bean jar. It sits on the shelf in my dorm room now. I took it from the house before I sold it, and I guard it jealously. I don't know if it still works the same now that Dad is dead.